the audience understand that how do you change your people in your offices so that both the conscious, unconscious, negative biases, they actually are not getting used in important decisions. For instance, when we are recruiting people or when we are forming teams. At the same time, are you following any structured approach so that this should not be a problem in future also? For instance, in your values or in your mission statement or your vision statement. Is there anything like that you people are doing in your companies?
A lot of
Anybody,
stuff.
it's open to all.
A lot of stuff. I think couple of things is one is just to have the conversation, to create spaces to have the conversation. Second is to actually have workshops around this topic and get people to talk about it and start to identify without any judgment. That to say we all have biases and some of us have been working on them, but still we are not free of them. We never will be, because that's the part of being human, that you will always have biases. All you can do is acknowledge, understand, and then see what you want to do about it. And the other thing I think someone said about the path, right? The processes that you put in place. So for example, at recruitment process, it's not just one person's decision. You try to codify it in terms of some forms or some assessments, and you have more than one person looking at the candidate, so that it's a joint decision, and therefore the biases may be counteracted. Same in promotions, etc. So those kinds of things you can do in terms of creating spaces, giving some learning, and having processes that support it, to make sure that people bring in data-based decisions versus bias-based decisions.
I'll add to it. I mean, a few things that you could do, and across different organizations that I've seen working. I think the first piece is, what are the value systems that you set up in an organization? I think recognizing that diversity and perspective is an important part of your value system and culture is very, very important and high when you really put it down. And many of the companies that I've worked in, it was a stated piece. It was part of the value system. It was something that was talked often. Second is build processes around it. And what do I mean by processes is, of course, the data and the metrics to see, is there a bias creeping in, and an analytics to see. But now there is a lot of companies have started using AI in interviews that goes across 5-6 interviews and just listens in and absorbs the competency framework to say what exactly happened, instead of biases creeping in when people come and talk about candidates. Did you really follow a process, right? Third, that I follow very, very deeply in organizations, especially decision-making leadership teams, is how are you building complementary decision-making teams? And which means that you actually, I believe that half of the cases in the world of companies that succeed or fail happen because of a human reason or an org reason. And I absolutely can debate with anybody here why it is, right? I think, why is Apple such a big company? I think Apple's biggest advantage is its employer brand. That's what they started. They started talking about their cool offices way before anybody else started, and started a trend. Started attracting best people to the best place to work. Yeah. If you were to think about why Kodak failed, yeah, I don't know how many of you know, but Kodak holds the patent on digital print. Yeah, but Kodak board and executive committee all consisted of Caucasian white men. So when the two young engineers brought in a digital film saying this is something we have developed, they said, who's going to look at it? Because look at our lustrous paper print. And we all know what happened with Kodak, that filed for bankruptcy, right? So I think it's very, very important to have complementary decision-making teams that understands, appreciates challenges, and comes together to build a decision-making for the company, whether it's on candidates. So typically, the panel for really critical roles is always diverse. And we always come together and debate it out with data points as to why. And everybody has to listen. So I think there are pieces you can build. Of course, I completely fully agree on awareness, building unconscious awareness, who are you, and all of that. But there are pieces, both technology-led and non-technology-led, that organizations are doing today and will continue to do. Because it actually is going to hamper your growth. I mean, I come now, almost all industries have been innovation-led. Today we are at Udaan, we solve a problem which has never been solved before in the world. And our life breath is about solving a problem. So innovation is a lifeblood. So if you actually tamper down a perspective, because nobody knows the answer, you will never get to the answer. So I think that's a little bit of my reflection on some of the things that we have done.
And you want to add to my
One, and both are about And I agree with all that they said, building training and, all of that I think is important. But I'll give you two examples. I think it's very important to make that move, make that beginning, take that first step. So I was the youngest HR manager for back in the day, SmithKline Beecham. I was an HR manager for a plant at the age of 27. And the interesting thing, I'm sure you will relate to this. The union leaders would tell me that I have children who are older than you. You know, but the bias was that you had to have gray hair and you had to be of certain experience before you be responsible for a plant and be a manager, right? And I have huge respect for my leaders who took that call, and I want to believe I really made a difference, right? Because you bring in different perspective, I could relate to them at a very different level, and it all worked out well. But the credit was not just to me, right? The credit was to the leaders who made that call, going against the grain to have somebody at the age of 27 be a HR manager for a plant. And trust me, the plant was, from an IR perspective, a disaster. We had just fired the general secretary before I moved. So I look back and give a lot of credit to my leaders who took that call. The second example is when I used to work for Emphasis, and I'm very proud about this one. We had a huge BPO practice, and I was heading a BPO for the company then. We grew to about 22,000 people, and we had a new head of diversity and inclusion, Meenu Bambani. And she came up with this idea about hiring people with disabilities for the BPO. Obviously, there was a huge resistance, right? What kind of a job can they do, and blah blah, all of it. Long story short, we cracked the code. We worked with an NGO, and I want to believe for many years, Emphasis was the award winner with NASSCOM for having the highest number of disabled employees. But that beginning, to make that first batch happen, required a lot of selling with the delivery managers, with everybody in the ecosystem. We actually went about doing structural changes to accommodate people with with disability, right? So the point is, we can, with everything else we do, the path, the third element of it, creating the ecosystem, making that first move, I think is extremely important for organizations, right? Otherwise, like she said, there's always an answer, there's always a reason why something cannot be done, but you've got to make that push.
A wonderful point. Diversity can be recruited, but inclusion has to be built. And for that, you need to create that ecosystem within the organization, all throughout, and unconscious bias and feedback and 360-degree. I mean, all kind of ways, even in terms of decision making, the way you move talent across. I mean, there are hajar different things actually to go about creating that inclusion piece within the company. So I think all good, but
just to add one more point to what Soma said, managers are not bad people, right? When people are scared of making that first move and making that change happen, it's because of their own insecurities. You want to bring in somebody who's different. They don't want their metrics to be hit. They don't want their productivity to be hit. So you've got to see how you will address those, work with them to create that inclusive environment.